In 1974, a luxury Mediterranean resort was sealed behind barbed wire, still intact. Furniture in the rooms, keys on the front desk, breakfast dishes on the tables. The military locked the gates and walked away. They expected to reopen them within months. 51 years later, the gates are still closed. The place had not been bombed. It had not been looted yet, or burned or demolished. It had simply been locked. One morning in August, 39,000 people packed a bag and left, expecting to be back by the weekend. The military arrived, strung barbed wire across every entrance, posted guards at the perimeter, and decided to keep the whole thing exactly as it was. An entire city sealed intact. Hotels still furnished, cars still in the driveways. One construction crane with 3 concrete blocks still hanging in the air, left exactly where they were when the operator dropped the controls and ran. The assumption was that the fence would come down quickly. It never did. To understand why anyone would lock up an entire city instead of destroying it, you need to know what Varosha was worth. That number explains everything that came after. Varosha was a 2.3 square mile beachfront district on the eastern coast of Cyprus, built almost entirely from scratch in the 1960s on what had been grazing fields outside the medieval walled city of Famagusta. Cyprus had gained independence from Britain in 1960, and the new republic needed foreign currency. Its eastern coastline had everything the post-war European jet set was looking for: golden sand, reliable sun, a short flight from London, and warm water that was swimmable 10 months of the year. Varosha was the construction site. By the early 1970s, the district had 45 hotels, more than 12,000 beds, 21 banks, and 24 cinemas. It generated more than half of Cyprus's entire tourism income. The Copacabana of the Mediterranean, people called it. Construction cranes never stopped. The skyline was a monument to a confidence that assumed the future would simply be a larger version of the present. Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor favoured a hotel called the Argo on John F. Kennedy Avenue. Brigitte Bardot sunbathed on Gloucester Beach. People who had been to the French Riviera came to Varosha and stopped making the comparison. Here is the detail almost nobody knows. In April 1970, 4 Swedish musicians arrived in Varosha on a promotional trip arranged by a Stockholm travel agency. They stayed at the Twiga Tower Hotel, a narrow high-rise on the beachfront whose name came from the Swahili word for giraffe. Bjorn Ulvaeus and Agnetha Faltskog had just gotten engaged on the plane over. The 4 musicians performed a 30-minute set at the Perrocate nightclub for Swedish United Nations peacekeepers stationed on Cyprus. It was the first time all 4 had performed together. They had not yet formed ABBA. 4 years later, the same year Varosha was sealed behind barbed wire, they won Eurovision with Waterloo. Their career was about to begin. Varosha's future was about to end. The Twiga Tower Hotel now stands a few metres inside the fenced zone. The fence that went up in 1974 has never come back down, and the negotiators have still not agreed on a price to take it down. That confidence had a crack running underneath it. While Varosha's Greek Cypriot hotels were filling with Scandinavian tourists, the old walled city of Famagusta, less than 2 kilometres to the north, had a predominantly Turkish Cypriot population that had been confined to enclaves since intercommunal violence in 1963. The prosperity of the resort district was real. The fault line beneath it was older than the hotels and considerably better armed. On July the 15th, 1974, a coup backed by the Greek military junta deposed Cyprus's elected president. Turkey launched a military intervention. A ceasefire followed. Negotiations in Geneva collapsed. On August 14th, Turkey launched the second phase of its offensive, an armoured advance toward the eastern coast. The target was Famagusta, specifically the old walled city. The Turkish military had not planned to take Varosha. When the advancing columns reached the coast and found the resort district largely empty, its civilians already in flight, they occupied it without significant resistance. What happened next was not a consequence, it was a decision. The military sealed the entire district with barbed wire, declared it a restricted zone, and stationed guards at the perimeter. Varosha, kept intact and valuable, was the most powerful concession Turkey could offer at a future negotiating table. Return the resort to its original owners, receive international recognition of the partition in exchange. The fence was expected to last months. This decision seemed small at the time. It wasn't. On August 14th and 15th, 39,000 Greek Cypriot residents evacuated Varosha in a matter of hours. The evacuation was coordinated by the nearby British military base at Decay. Families loaded into cars and drove south toward Paralimni and Larnaca, towns close enough to the new ceasefire line that many could see their former homes from the other side of the fence. Most packed for a weekend. One resident recalls her mother moving to the windows as the family rushed to leave, starting to lower the front blinds, the instinct of a woman who had spent a Cypriot summer protecting her furniture from the sun. She closed the ones on the left and the right, then they ran. They left behind meals on stoves, cars in driveways, wedding dresses still in wardrobes, and shredded laundry still hanging on clotheslines on hotel balconies overlooking the sea. Nobody came back. In the months that followed, Turkish soldiers moved systematically through the district. Furniture was removed, vehicles were taken, air conditioning units, power sockets, ceiling lamps, shutters, any fitting of value was stripped out and transported north. Buildings that had been sealed full were left as empty shells. This detail is missing from most accounts of Varosha, but it changes the picture. The resort was not preserved. It was emptied first, then sealed, and the emptiness has been sitting there ever since. 2 years after the sealing, in 1976, a British electrical engineer named Alan Cavender was given restricted access to Varosha. His task was to restore the air conditioning system at the Constantia Hotel. What he found is documented in Alan Wiseman's 2007 book, The World Without Us. The hotel registry was still open to August 1974. Room keys lay where they had been tossed on the front desk. The windows facing the sea had been left open and blowing sand had formed small dunes in the lobby. Breakfast dishes, licked clean by mice, were still on the tables. Flowers had dried in the vases. He walked outside and found trees already growing in the middle of the road. Australian wattles, a fast-growing acacia species planted by the hotels for landscaping, were pushing up through the asphalt, some nearly 3 feet high. Within a few years, wild Cyprus cyclamen seeds had wedged into pavement cracks, germinated and heaved aside entire slabs of cement. A Turkish journalist named Metin Munir visited in the 1990s and wrote about streets rippling with white cyclamen blooms. He noted that the wrecking crews were not just trees but flowers, tiny seeds doing what 50 years of diplomacy could not. By 2024, a Cyprus Department of Antiquities drone survey found that more than 70% of Varosha's buildings now suffer from severe structural damage. The 1970s era reinforced concrete was not engineered for 50 years of uninterrupted exposure to salt-laden Mediterranean air. The iron rebar inside corroded, expanded and fractured the cement from within, a process called spalling that has left the facades of the beachfront towers pockmarked and crumbling. Balconies that once held cocktail glasses have collapsed into rubble. On several of the high-rise hotels, entire exterior walls have sheared away, exposing cross-sections of apartments, a strip of 1970s wallpaper, a rusted bed frame, a light fixture dangling from a wire. One structure tells the story more plainly than any of the hotels. A 10-story construction crane still stands over an unfinished hotel at the edge of Varosha. 3 concrete blocks are still hanging from its arm. The operator ran in August 1974 and never came back. The crane has been standing there for 51 years. That hotel is still unfinished. The concrete blocks are still in the air, suspended above a building that stopped becoming something the day the gates closed. There are 17,000 families who cannot walk to it. Their property claims are still unresolved. The fence that was supposed to protect the value of all of it is the reason the value disappeared. And then decades later, something returned to the beach. But it was not the residents. Gloucester Beach, the stretch of golden sand that made Varosha famous, has been dark and undisturbed since 1974. No sunbeds, no umbrellas, no human footprints most of the year. Sea turtles began nesting on the sealed beach by 2014 when the BBC first reported the activity. By 2019, the Cyprus Wildlife Federation began tracking a measurable trend, a 40% increase in loggerhead turtle nesting on the beach since that year. The Mediterranean loggerhead is a vulnerable species that requires undisturbed dark beach to nest successfully. Varosha's sealed coastline created exactly those conditions by accident and by military order. The same beach where Brigitte Bardot sunbathed now belongs to the turtles. Nobody changed their minds about that. It just happened while the diplomats were busy. When the gates finally opened, the people walking in were not coming home. In October 2020, the Turkish Cypriot administration, backed by Turkish President Erdogan, partially reopened Varosha to visitors for the first time in 46 years. The United Nations condemned it, the European Union condemned it. What was reopened was 3.5% of Varosha's total area, a single paved avenue called Demokratia Street and a stretch of the Golden Coast beach accessible through a military checkpoint. By 2024, more than 2.2 million people had passed through that checkpoint. Most people know that detail. Here is the one they don't. Walking the reopened strip, you pass a disco sign still readable above a doorway that has not had customers since the 1970s. The Toyota dealership on Leonidas Street is visible from the perimeter, cars still inside after 5 decades. Bicycle rental stands and ice cream kiosks line the corridor. The hollowed facades of the King George and the Argo loom behind the beach, their windows black, their balconies collapsed. The original residents largely did not come. Most of the 39,000 people who left in 1974 refused to enter TRNC-controlled territory because crossing the checkpoint is seen as legitimizing the occupation. For those who did cross, what they found was not a return. It was a guided tour of someone else's interrupted life. The numbers explain why the fence is still there. As of 2024, more than 17,000 original property claims remain unresolved, according to UNFICYP estimates. The Immovable Property Commission has paid approximately $670 million in compensation across 2,000 handled cases. The estimated total owed is €20 billion. The buildings are collapsing faster than the negotiations move. In 2004, a UN reunification plan called the Annan Plan would have returned Varosha to its original residence. Turkish Cypriots voted 65% in favour. Greek Cypriots voted 76% against. The people who lost their homes rejected the deal that would have given them back. That one vote is why the crane is still standing with 3 blocks in the air. Varosha was not ruined because people forgot it. It was ruined because too many people remembered exactly what it was worth. The room keys are still on the front desk at the Constantia Hotel, or they were the last time anyone looked. The same resort that was sealed to protect its value is now 70% structurally compromised, its beach held by turtles, its streets readable only through a military checkpoint, its 17,000 property claims unpaid. The fence that was supposed to last months has outlasted the careers of every diplomat who touched it. Nobody has been inside the Constantia in a long time, and the keys are still there.